Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Sentry Dynamics BF12. But before we can get into the video, we do need to thank the sponsor of the video and the channel, and that is, of course, Gun Deals. Now, if you don't know, I personally do exclusive videos for Gun Deals. In fact, this week or earlier this week, you may have seen a video on this very shotgun on Gun Deals' YouTube channel. Now, that's not really my fault, as I gave them that video several months ago and I have continued to shoot and test this gun, so this is much more of an updated review, again, if you've already seen that video on their channel. Now, on top of being a YouTube channel that I exclusively provide content for, they are also, of course, a website that provides you with links to some of the best prices and products within the industry. Basically, if there's anything that you're looking for within the gun industry sphere, go ahead and check their website first. They probably have a link to it for the best possible price. Now, the service is completely free, doesn't cost you anything. They don't buy or sell anything. Once again, they only provide you with links and sometimes exclusive discount codes to save you a little bit more money on top of the already really good deals that are posted on there. Some of them are sponsored deals from the actual manufacturers or distributors, and then of course there's also individual user deals as well. So the best deals online are going to be found on gun.deals. Now, if you want to help me out personally, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and it really does help me out in the YouTube algorithm. And on top of that, go ahead and comment literally anything down below. Now, on top of that, if you want to financially support me directly, there are a couple ways to do that. You can do Subscribestar, which you get entered into some very cool giveaways, and on top of that, I send you some additional content every month. And there's also a possibility of Mark IV upper receivers being sold very soon. Now, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into my relationship with Sentry Dynamics. Now, Sentry Dynamics, initially I had no relationship with whatsoever. They were a company that reached out to Gun Deals to do some videos for, so then Gun Deals actually sent me this shotgun to review, and then later on, towards the end of the review process, is when I actually got in contact with some of the guys from Sentry Dynamics. So I have chatted with them a little bit, and they did allow me to keep this shotgun free of charge, so I do want you guys to know that. However, I can say whatever I want. In fact, the Sentry Dynamics PAS-12, I did a video on that and I absolutely hated that shotgun. The video is still up on my YouTube channel. Basically, the gun did not work for me and I did not like it whatsoever. So they were totally cool with the fact that I didn't like it, that the gun didn't work for me, and they understand that, you know, everybody's going to get guns like that. And they were still very cool to work with, even though I trashed one of their products. So now with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the basics on this very interesting semi-automatic 12 gauge bullpup mag-fed shotgun. And now that's a lot of interesting combinations right off the bat, but let's get into some of the basics before we kind of delve into how well that works together. So, starting off with the operating system. This is, again, semi-automatic, mag-fed through either 5, 10, 20 round drums, or even some 2-round magazines for like hunting applications and stuff like that, I suppose. But this is technically a short stroke piston operated system, as you do have a piston that operates upon your operating rods that works the bolt, and it is a technically short stroke piston system, and it has worked extremely well so far. Now, we'll get into the more specifics of it later on, but right now that is the operating system. We'll take it apart so you guys can see everything that's going on. Now, in terms of the barrel, we have a 18.5-inch 4140 chrome moly steel. There's nothing special about the barrel, really. In some areas, it's not really nitrated or coated, really, so it's kind of almost a bare metal finish. In some areas, it's nothing special whatsoever, but I do want to be noted that it's not really like nitrated or anything entirely. So if you are going to be using this in more wet environments, kind of like I am here in the Pacific Northwest, you could run into long-term rust issues if you're not cleaning it or maintaining it or making sure that it's nice and lubricated, so that it does not rust out on you. Now, usually when you think of an 18.5-inch barrel, you're probably thinking more of a long gun, a DMR, that sort of thing. But when, of course, you have this in a bullpup package, which is a very, very short overall package, this is a very, very compact, very handy gun in, of course, 12 gauge. Now, this is actually about as long as an 11.5 or a 10.5 AR-15 fully collapsed. So again, this is a very tight, very compact overall length. I believe the overall length is 28.5 inches, somewhere right around there, because of course shotguns are a little bit different, because you don't want to have this categorized as like a short barrel shotgun or anything else like that. So I believe the overall length is like somewhere between 28 and 30 inches, but still overall very, very short. Alrighty, so moving back from the barrel and the operating system, let's go ahead and talk about the bolt. Now the bolt is still going to be one of the biggest question marks on these sorts of firearms coming out of Turkey. And that is mostly because I have no idea what the bolt is made out of, what sort of process it goes through, anything like that. I couldn't really find any information online on these specific shotguns, how their bolts are made, what they're made out of. And now I know that 12 gauge is not necessarily the most high pressure round. It is a very powerful round, but it's not necessarily high pressure. And I haven't really seen a lot of 12 gauge bolts crack. However, that is just going to be a question mark on this operating system in general, because I don't know what sort of material the bolt is made out of. I could assume that it is made out of a high quality steel, but that would be a pretty big assumption. Now, for some people, the fact that this shotgun does come out of Turkey is going to be a turnoff. However, unfortunately, Turkey has been making extremely high quality firearms and gunpowder devices for centuries. Just ask Constantinople. Now, in terms of testing and round count, at this point, we're at about 800 rounds of 12 gauge through this. I want to say probably 500 rounds of 2 3/4 inch birdshot, and a couple hundred rounds of 2 3/4 inch buckshot, some slugs, and some 3-inch hunting loads, which are basically kind of like a short magnum, not a full 3.5 inch magnum, but a very, very strong 3-inch load that we've put through this shotgun. And there's not really any excessive wear on the internals of the upper receiver or on the bolt carrier. There's nothing that I could find that would give me pause to its long-term durability. However, the only way to truly test long-term durability would be to put thousands and thousands of rounds through this shotgun. Now, since this is my personal shotgun, I will continue to shoot it because it is a very, very fun gun, as hopefully you would have gotten by the intro and the fact that I made a couple videos on it so far. It is a very, very fun gun, and on top of that, it has also been extremely reliable. In total, I want to say we've had 4 malfunctions with this shotgun. We had it initially, it didn't want to cycle some of the 3-inch hunting loads that I was talking about, but then later on it did want to cycle those just fine. It did have a failure to eject on one of the 2 3/4 inch birdshot, which I think was like 1200 FPS birdshot from Winchester. So very, very light load, and it had one failure to eject out of like 300 rounds of that probably. And on top of that, a few other little things here and there. A couple of them could have been magazine related, as the magazines we'll get into later are a bit of an oddball in and of themselves, but overall, for a sort of budget style semi-automatic shotgun in a very odd configuration, it has been extremely reliable. And not only has it been reliable, but it's also fed, again, basically everything that I could put through it. The only thing that it absolutely would not feed is the Aguila mini shells, but that I wasn't really expecting it to feed anyways, and it did of course have a few hiccups here and there, but overall it has done an exceptional job of feeding basically anything that I put through it. Now at this point, I have only taken apart and cleaned this shotgun twice in the 800 rounds that I've shot through it, which isn't terribly long periods of time in between cleaning. Certain shotguns will definitely be a lot more finicky, although certain like really, really high quality like Berettas and stuff like that will go, you know, 1,000+ rounds without needing any real tear down cleaning. Now, as of right now, at the point of filming this video, this is a squeaky clean gun, as I did just take it apart, lubricate it, clean it completely so I could check for any premature wear or anything else like that overall in the system. So as you see it right now, it is perfectly cleaned and lubricated. Now, before we take the gun apart and get into the overall build design and build quality, let's go ahead and talk about ergonomics really quickly. Now, as you can imagine, this is again a bullpup shotgun, so it has a bit of a different grip style as you have both of your forward hands very close to each other. This shotgun does come with the very nice angled foregrip, which works perfectly. It's very, very comfortable for me, and it has a over molded like rubberized A2 style grip. It's not my favorite style of grip, but it definitely does work. I'm not exactly sure if you can replace this with like standard AR-15 grips or anything else like that. I didn't really try because the grip that it comes with works just fine. Now, you also have ambidextrous safeties, so you have safeties here on the left and the right, and it can be actuated when the hammer is down, so at any point you can put the safety on. Some people are going to like that. Personally, I'm a big fan of the way AR-15s work, where you can just very simply check the safety to see if that hammer is down or not, whereas on this gun you would have to check to see if you were clear or not, put it on fire, pull the trigger, and then you know that the hammer is forward. So now that we've brought it up, we might as well talk about the trigger. Now, the trigger in most bullpups are going to be inferior to their traditional counterparts, simply because on traditional styled rifles and shotguns, there's a lot less going on. So for instance, here is the hammer and the disconnector all the way here in the back behind the magazine, and here is the trigger itself. So you have a couple steel bars interacting with each other from here all the way to back here. So that's about a 15-inch steel bar that you're pulling on when the hammer is down, of course, that then actuates the hammer. So what that means is you get a very heavy, very gritty trigger feel. However, it is fairly consistent, and as you'll see in the intro, I was still able to fire it quite quickly. However, the trigger is definitely the limiting factor. So basically, let's pull that. Trigger is very heavy, very, very heavy. It gets a little stagey, and then it kind of just breaks at probably somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds. Again, it's a very, very heavy trigger. However, again, doesn't really matter all that much on a 12 gauge shotgun. I was still able to shoot with slugs out to like 70 yards, no problems. And of course, was still able to shoot fairly quickly up close. So for all intents and purposes, the trigger is usable. However, it is going to be worse than basically any other trigger out there on a traditional styled shotgun. And in fact, I have a video on the G-Force Arms GF12, which is a standard traditional with the magazine in front of the fire control unit. And that has a very similar feeling trigger, just about 4 pounds lighter. So I'm able to go faster with that trigger versus this one, because this is just a lot heavier. Now, it feels basically just like a mil-spec AR-15 trigger with a little bit of creep and kind of a rolling break. This is, again, just about twice as heavy as those. Now, you've probably already noticed, just because I've been fidgeting with it without realizing it, is that this does have a reciprocating charging handle. So for me, that's not a big deal whatsoever. I keep it on the right side. However, it is ambidextrous, so it can be swapped to the left side as well. We'll get into that in just a minute. But it does have a reciprocating steel charging handle that indexes in your operating rod, so it can also be used as a forward assist should you ever need it. The only time I ever really use it as a forward assist is when I would chamber check, so pull it back a little bit, and then plastic shells aren't always the best for going back into the chamber the same way, so sometimes you need to just push them in a little bit to get them to lock in place. But overall, I quite like the charging handle. It's long enough without being too long, and it definitely has enough knurling and grip texture on it to be usable even when you're using gloves. Now, when you get to the back of the shotgun, that's where your ergonomics get a little bit funky, because you have a magazine release here on the bottom right side of the magazine well, and then you have a bolt release, because this is a last round bolt hold open shotgun, which is basically an AR-10 style bolt release all the way here on the other side, which can be very difficult to reach with your left hand. I have smaller hands than the average person, so it's a little bit more difficult for me. Now, if you'll notice how I reload these, let's go ahead and stick in a 10 round mag because we're cool, is I reach back with my left hand and just put my thumb just over the side, push the button. They don't actually always drop free. I'll show you that in just a second. So how I would do it is reach over, it drops just a little bit, then you rip it out, because without the bolt going forward, without the pressure on the bolt, they don't actually drop free, at least not in my circumstances. Reload the new mag, and then come over with my whole hand and push down with it, because this does take quite a bit of force to depress, because these magazines are, one, quite large and heavy, but they also have very, very strong springs and followers. So how I like to do it is kind of a two-step process. So reach your thumb over, if you guys can see that, push the button, rip it out, reinsert, come over with the whole hand, depress the bolt release, and send the bolt home. Now let's put the gun down for just a second, because we do need to talk about the magazines. Now, it's no secret and it's widely known that if you feed your gun really crappy magazines, no matter how reliable your gun is, crappy magazines, bad mags, will make your gun unreliable. Now, that is why I am very happy to say that in my initial, again, about 800 rounds of testing on this shotgun, plus about 500 rounds on another shotgun that also uses these magazines, The 5-rounders and the 10-rounders are extremely reliable. Now, this uses the Mark 1919 magazines, I believe. I'll leave an annotation in the description or right here if I get that number wrong. But the style of magazines that these take apparently run very, very well. Now, they're very heavy, aluminum and steel construction, with a lot of like overmolded plastic on them, but they are very heavy. This one here is the 10-round magazine, which is huge, and the 5-round magazines. Mine came with a 5-rounder and actually, funnily enough, a 2-round magazine as well for, like, again, hunting applications or stuff like that, which is a flush fit magazine. Looks kind of cool in there. But this one here has also been reliable. I just haven't shot it very much because it's only 2 rounds. The 5 and 10 rounders have been exceptionally reliable. The 20-round drums, on the other hand, have been more finicky, though I would still be very impressed with their reliability. There were many times I was able to mag dump consecutive mags of 20 plus rounds in this drum without issue. And it's this one here is actually made in the USA, and it's made by ProMag. Now, if you guys know anything about the channel, if you've watched some of my older videos, you know that I very, very much dislike ProMag. Almost all of their magazines, whether it's AR-10, AR-762x39, AR-15 magazines, almost every single one has given me way more trouble than they're worth. This magazine, though, is very expensive. These are about $130. In full disclosure, this was sent to me by Sentry Dynamics. And it's actually performed pretty well. Now, on this shotgun, it does not really fit in the magazine well because of the front plastic. So right now, it's actually not in the magazine well all the way, because you can still just rip it out. So how I'll show you how I did it was you basically need to slam it into the gun to kind of get it to fit inside of the magazine well. Good. Now, something that you probably also noticed on this drum mag, especially with this Bullpup shotgun, is that to grip it, you have to put your hand in here around the magazine, because this is a huge, chunky magazine. So you kind of got to get up and come around the magazine to get a full grip on the gun. So overall, it does work, and it actually works fairly well. However, this drum magazine is going to work much, much better in the traditional styled shotgun with, again, the fire control unit behind the magazine rather than in front of it. So just to reiterate, the 10 and 5-round magazines work extremely well most of the time. Some of them drop free, some of them don't, so there's a little bit of variation there. And it's also, of course, going to depend on the shotgun that you're putting them in, because there are a lot of shotguns floating around that do accept those magazines. I would, for the most part, stick away from the drum magazine because it is very, very expensive, whereas I believe the 10 rounders are like $30. You can actually get like 4 or 5 10 rounders for the price of one 20-round drum, and the 10 rounders work better to begin with, so that is probably what I would stick with. So now we're going to go ahead and actually take apart and disassemble the shotgun and give you guys a much better look at it. However, I do want to say that this is going to be mostly pertinent only to the Sentry Dynamics BF12, as I know that there are a lot of other variations of shotguns, of similar styled shotguns, bullpup and traditional styled shotguns floating around the market, imported from Turkey. However, again, there's going to be slight variations and different specifications and different choices in designs and assemblies, all that sort of stuff. So for the purposes of this disassembly, it's going to mostly pertain only to the Sentry Dynamics BF12, because again, I'm just not familiar and haven't tried all of the other plethora of models on the market. So with that out of the way, this is almost an AR-15 style. You have 3 takedown pins. Let me grab a little rubber mallet. Some of them are a little bit stiffer than others to get out. So you have 3 captured takedown pins. One in the front, one in front of the magwell, and then one, of course, at the rear as well. That middle one might not come out. So right after you take out the 3 takedown pins, which again, they are captured on this specific model, though I have seen other models that they are not captured on. This is the lower receiver. This is not the serialized portion, though I don't think they sell them separately. So in here you of course have your trigger up front, and you have this very long steel rod that runs all the way back to the hammer back here, And of course you can just send that forward. And now this is a mostly polymer. It's about 90% polymer, some sort of pretty rigid, pretty strong plastic. Again, I've shot a lot of rounds through it and I don't notice any cracking, nothing whatsoever really on the plastic itself. In temperatures right around freezing all the way to about 90 degrees in the summer, so I haven't really noticed any issues with polymer in general. There are a lot of very cool firearms that use polymer lower receivers, so I don't really have a problem with the polymer. Some people would like to see all steel or all aluminum based shotguns, and personally I think going with a polymer lower makes a lot of sense for a more budget styled shotgun. And again, this is already a fairly heavy shotgun, as we'll get into later. So having a polymer lower that does work and has not really exhibited any issues for me yet, it's not really a big deal. Now, I haven't mentioned it yet, but this one here actually did come with a Cheekriser here. I just straight up removed it and threw it away because I was never going to use it, because you do have a straight line axis for your recoil, and there's no like Picatinny riser or anything on it, so it's not like you need a Cheekriser for any situation that I could think of. So since it was just taking up some space and adding a little bit of weight, I just took that off and threw it away. On the back here, we have a very nice, very large rubberized butt pad, which is going to be nice. You are shooting a 12 gauge, so if you go out there and shoot 200-300 rounds in a day, you are going to be feeling it a little bit later on. The only thing for me that's a real miss on the lower receiver is that there's not really any good QD points for a sling. Now, moving on to the upper receiver, this is a solid chunk of 7075 T6 aluminum, very, very nicely machined. It's kind of a two-piece setup, so in total it's kind of a three-piece setup when you look at the lower receiver. This is a chunk of aluminum here for the upper receiver, and then the handguard, which is a separate unit, which we'll take apart in just a second, is also 7075 T6 aluminum. Now, these are Cerakote matched in kind of this OD green, which is a really cool color, but they do also sell it in like 20 or 30 other colors, so basically any color you can think of or camo pattern, and it's probably on there. Now, to disassemble the upper receiver, we first got to take off the barrel shroud, which is kind of a barrel shroud slash faux suppressor, and it's on there pretty tight. Just because I put it on there very, very tight. So then you unscrew the faux suppressor, which is, or just barrel shroud, whatever you want to call it, and it's about 6 inches long, made out of aluminum, a little heavy. Now here is where we have our chokes. You can use, I believe it comes with 3 different chokes. It comes with a slug, a standard, and a modified choke. So for more like hunting or birdshot applications, you can definitely switch those out to suit your preference. I did not do any switching of them out. I didn't really test them whatsoever. Now, to get the handguard completely off, because it is still locked in place via your charging handle, because again, it is attached to the operating rod. Usually you can pull it out, but on this specific shotgun, I find it easier to just take a pin and punch and push it out. You should be able to pull it out, but on this unit, it's just a little tighter than it needs to be. So now let's go ahead and talk about the handguard. So technically they call it like an 11-inch handguard, though it's a little bit longer than that. So you have a monolithic Picatinny Rail section up top, and you also have 3 short sections, one on each side, and then on the bottom. The one on the bottom though is covered up because you have, again, this very nicely angled foregrip on the bottom. Now, in terms of rail space, there's not a ton of rail space on the shotgun. However, you don't really need a whole lot for a shotgun. Basically, you're going to be putting on either iron sights or a red dot, maybe a light and a grip, and then you're good to go. And for that amount of stuff, you have a perfect amount of rail space. And again, this is a very, very high quality handguard, 7075 T6 aluminum. Huge, huge anti-rotation tabs that lock into the upper receiver, just like that. So it has a very, very nice tight fit, nice lockup, and the finish match is actually a lot better than a lot of USA Cerakotes, so that's pretty interesting. So now that we have the handguard off, let's go ahead and talk about the barrel, upper receiver, and of course the recoil assembly. Now the front half of the barrel, you'll notice, is what looks like a phosphate slash parkerization finish on the front half of the barrel. However, the rear half of the barrel is, again, what appears to me to just be bare, so it's not really going to be resistant to rust and other things like that. But let's go ahead and start with the recoil assembly and work our way down. So up front we have our piston retaining cup and a couple little pieces here that lock that in place. here we have our piston. Now on other shotguns, similarly styled shotguns, I have seen them come with different weighted pistons because of course when you put the same amount of force to a heavier object, you get a slower velocity, which results in a slower bolt velocity. So if you're using very, very heavy loads, like slugs or buckshot or 3-inch magnums, that sort of thing, you might want to slow down that recoil impulse so you're not beating up your upper receiver and your shoulder or outrunning the magazines or something like that. Now, this one here only came with one piston cup, or one piston weight, I should say. However, it has worked basically flawlessly right off the bat with every single type of ammunition that I could feed it, including the weakest of the weakest ammunition. Now, that being said, if you're running some really oddball, super light ammunition, it's not really guaranteed to run. I believe they recommend like 1250 and higher. So that is what I would recommend as well. However, again, it did run with even the cheapest ammunition that I could find locally. So your piston cup traps all the gases and then it forces upon the piston, which pushes down on your entire recoil assembly. Here you have your operating rods and that attaches to your bolt, which we'll get to in just a second. And then you have the spring, which is actually captured in the front part of the recoil assembly. So internally, the only thing that's inside your upper receiver is going to be your bolt. So then because we can, I'm actually going to take apart the entire recoil assembly so you guys can see how it actually works. And that was just a standard like AR-15 armorer's wrench. Actually, I'm turning it the wrong way like a doofus. Yeah. So you don't need a lot of pressure when you're taking on or off the barrel nut. So then once you're finally done unscrewing your barrel nut, you can simply remove the entire barrel and recoil assembly. And from here, let's go ahead and fully take it apart. So the first thing we're going to do is remove our piston cup retaining device. And it has a couple little moon clips here. And then your piston retaining cup will come straight out. Your piston can come straight out. Now I just cleaned this, so it should actually come out pretty easy. There it is. This is your piston right here. And then if you can see on camera, not sure how well you guys can see that, but there are 3 very large, very substantial ports on the barrel itself that feed into your piston retaining cup that then actuate upon the piston, which acts upon the entire recoil assembly. And now that we've broken it down to this point, we can actually pull back on our entire recoil assembly. The bolt itself will kind of just drop out, pull out our very large, very substantial operating rods, and you can see how it locks into the bolt here. You have huge chunks of steel that interact with the bolt. So in terms of the design of the actual recoil assembly, everything is very, very substantial. We have a very, very large, very powerful spring that helps to negate some of that recoil. And finally, we have our steel barrel nut. Now, here's the barrel assembly. This one here is a very, very simple barrel. It's 4140, so the material itself is very high quality. However, again, on the back half here, there's not really any finish applied to it. You definitely could apply your own finish to it, but because you have a spring riding over top and you have pistons and hot gases flowing right over the finish the entire time, whatever finish you do apply to the barrel probably isn't going to last all that long. Now, if we talk about the barrel extension for a second, it has one locking lug in the top because of course there is a locking lug on the bolt as well, which we'll get into in just a second. But overall, the barrel extension is very, very simple, has a little cutout for your very standard style extractor, kind of like a Glock style extractor is what it looks like actually. So on the bolt itself, we actually have a spring-loaded firing pin, and it has one of the most extended firing pins that I've ever seen. It sticks out about 1/4 inch when fully depressed, which I suppose for 12 gauge is just fine. Again, on top we have a singular locking lug, which is a very, very substantial piece of steel. There is a little bit of wear on it, where it of course interacts with the steel on the barrel, but overall for about 800 rounds, it's very, very minor. We have a channel here for one of the operating rods. Again, the finish looks very, very good. The extractor, which again looks basically identical to a Glock extractor. Very, very simple because it uses a spring and plunger design. Again, basically identical to a Glock. Overall, the bolt is very, very simple, very robust. And if the materials hold up, well, it's a very, very good design because of course, simpler most of the time is better. So now that I've fully disassembled it for you, I got to go ahead and put everything back together. One thing I forgot to mention, upper receiver, this is basically just a hollow chunk of steel, or sorry, not steel, chunk of aluminum. This is very, very thick, which is a good thing. You are dealing with 12 gauge overall. The wear and tear is extremely minimal. You do have two sections here that are kind of like rails for your operating rods to slide in and out on, because it does have a very, very smooth action. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take your barrel nut, slide it down, threads down, so that of course you can tighten it back to your upper receiver. Go ahead and put your spring on, then your operating rods. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the bolt in the barrel itself so that I can kind of just lift up a little bit. And again, those huge chunks of steel integrate right in there with it. Now here we need to actually put in the rest of our recoil assembly. So our piston goes down, and then our piston cup, which again traps all of those gases in so that they work against the piston. Push down a little bit, install our moon clips that keep our piston cup in place. And then you have this little guy that screws in over top to make sure that none of that stuff moves, to make sure all the gases head back to interact again on your short stroke piston system. So now with your barrel and recoil assembly reinstalled, you can go ahead, put that back into your upper receiver, and then torque down. Now you only really need to get the barrel nut hand tight. However, I usually go just a smidge over with an armorer's wrench or any sort of spanner wrench, and that should be more than enough. I actually need to get the charging handle out, which sometimes comes out, sometimes does not. And then you of course have your handguard, which in this case has the SIG Romeo 5 XDR on it, which is a mouthful. Then we have our handguard retaining pin, which goes down, and then our faux suppressor that also locks in the handguard so that it does not move whatsoever. Go ahead and tighten that guy back down. Reinsert our charging handle into the operating rods. I again use mine on the right side of the gun so that it doesn't interact with any of my gear or anything else that I'm wearing. And then take our long, somewhat awkward looking lower receiver, line it back up with the upper receiver, which can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And then go ahead and push these pins back in place. They should all go in place fairly easy, although sometimes they might take a little bit more convincing. Overall, I have really had a good time with this shotgun. It has performed very, very well. It has been much more reliable than I would have assumed previously. Again, feeding basically every ammunition that I put through it. A few small hiccups here and there, but for most budget semi-automatic shotguns, that's a lot better than what you're going to expect. Sometimes budget shotguns tend to tear themselves apart after a short amount of time, or they're very, very finicky with certain ammunitions, and fortunately for me, the Sentry Dynamics BF12 has been neither of those things. Now, overall, I want to say that these shotguns are selling, Sentry Dynamics is selling them for $600 to $800, depending on their configurations, and they have a ton of other shotguns and stuff on their website as well that you can purchase. Overall, I think $600 to $800 is a decent price for a very good, very high value semi-automatic shotgun, and again, a magazine-fed semi-automatic shotgun, so you don't need to learn how to quad load or anything else like that. The ergonomics, the package is a little weird being a bullpup, but overall very, very fun, and it is definitely unique. Now, I'm not really going to say that it's a crazy high value shotgun or that I would recommend it if you're going to go for more of a serious use case like home defense or something else like that, because plastic shotgun shells do tend to deform over time. So if you keep one of these guys loaded, make sure that you're using a shell that has a very, very strong, very rigid hole that's not going to deform over time and therefore not feed properly when you need it to. So for super, super serious applications, home defense, that sort of thing, I personally wouldn't use it for that application just because I like 5.56 ARs, short-barreled ARs are perfect inside of the house. Very, very low recoil, very, very high round count. Now, not that shotguns are ineffective by any means, but me personally, I just prefer ARs for that sort of thing. Now, in terms of hunting, competition, or a fun gun, absolutely. It is an incredibly fun gun to shoot if you love shooting 12 gauge, if you love shooting trap, if you love whatever it is that you like to do with the 12 gauge out in the woods, this is going to do an exceptionally good job at all of those things. And in fact, because it has been so reliable, especially with hotter ammunition, I would have no problem running the shotgun in a 3-gun match, or, you know, whatever sort of competitions that you do for like long range type stuff. It's not really going to have the barrel length that you're going to want on like some other shotguns that have like 25 and 30-inch barrels for like super serious hunting applications and that sort of thing. But for anything that you would use a fun all-purpose shotgun for, this one here will do it for a very, very good price. And personally, for about $600 to $800, I think that it is in a pretty good spot when it comes to semi-automatic shotguns, because it's still well below both your Berettas and your Benellis. It's going to be a significant discount on both of those shotguns. However, it does not have the pedigree, or I would say the true long-term reliability, the true ultimate reliability that you're going to get with some of those shotguns. So for super serious applications, for shotgun stuff, I would still stick with Berettas and Benellis because they have a very long track record of doing a very, very good job. Now, for everything other than that, than the top most serious of use cases for a shotgun, it does a really good job, so I'm going to continue to use it. I'm going to continue to shoot it, and if anything changes in the future, I will let you guys know. But that's about it for me, guys. It is very, very cold out here, and I've been talking for almost an hour now. So I will go ahead and see you guys in the next one. Let me know what you guys think of this down in the comments down below, or some other budget shotguns that I should check out. But once again, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace off.